Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you've just found this place, then welcome, and if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theorycraft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Today, we are continuing with our Frosthaven series of character builds, where we're trying to take the character classes from the game Frosthaven and recreate them in Dungeons & Dragons. Since Frosthaven is a newer game compared to the rest of the Gloomhaven series that it is from, there's going to be a few classes that we eventually get to that are supposed to be unlocked as you play through the game, and so I'll give a spoiler warning when we do get to those character classes. But for right now, we're continuing with our starting 6 characters that are completely open knowledge. Continuing our starting 6 character classes today, we are looking at the Boneshaper. The Boneshaper is by far and away the main summoner of the starting 6 Frosthaven character classes. A few of the other ones do have access to summons, but the Boneshaper revolves around summons completely. More than just being a summoner, the Boneshaper is a classic necromancer. They're capable of summoning skeletons, spirits, and a variety of other undead creatures. In D&D terms though, we're not just going to be a necromancer wizard. Would be one way to recreate them, but we want to make this a little bit different to add a little bit more flavor of having a direct connection to the plane of death/undeath. Mechanically speaking though, our Frosthaven Boneshaper and any sort of necromancer type character in D&D are only slightly different. The unique mechanics that the Boneshaper brings are the fact that they can sacrifice their life, and usually have to sacrifice their life, in order to summon their minions. And of course, they also have interactions with elements as well as various conditions. The Boneshaper is particularly fond of the dark and earth element, which makes sense given that they are supposed to be summoning undead and dark creatures. And for conditions, they really like the poison condition. They have a couple ways that they can be built to allow them to allow both them and their minions to spread poison to their enemies. For D&D, we can probably get the healing of our minions pretty easily, and the conditions/elements we'll be able to pick up at least in theme, but we won't be able to get the ability to sacrifice life. Strictly because that's not a price that we actually need to pay to use spells like Animate Dead in D&D. If you still want that theme of paying your life in order to summon your undead minions, then you could probably work with your DM to be able to get that theme. But strictly speaking, there's no way to summon an undead minion using only your life as a resource. Instead, we'll just stick with these spell slots and hopefully try to find other ways that we can interact with our health a little bit. But for the most part, we're okay with just getting the ability to summon minions from the grave. Before we start into the actual build now, let's look at their flavor text. The Aether Boneshaper. Aethers were once human, but a tragedy long ago caused them to lose their physical form, scattering it across the infinite planes. Those who willed their psyche together found a world they no longer recognized, and so they left, traveling the planes in search of knowledge and hidden insights. Occasionally they return, driven by varied purposes and employing bewildering methods. Aethers draw energy from the planes, and the planes are full of useful and terrible things. Boneshapers are able to tap into the wells of life found in other planes and infuse them into living things on this one, or at least things that were once living. Invariably, some of the Boneshaper's own life force is transferred with it, and many go mad through the constant push and pull of life and death. Very few are capable of taming the wild energy and shaping it to their will. Starting into character creation now with our lineage, we are an Aether, like a few of our Gloomhaven classes were. Aethers don't really have a counterpart in Dungeons & Dragons specifically. There are a few close ones, like Aasimar or the Kalashtar from Eberron, but honestly, we're just going to go with custom lineage instead, because that's what we've done for other Aether characters as well. With custom lineage, we're going to take dark vision over the free skill that we could pick up, simply because the dark vision is probably going to be a bit more helpful for us rather than the skill, and it kind of makes sense that given that we have a connection to planes of life and death, dark vision probably interacts with that in some way. We're also going to be a size medium instead of size small, and for our free feat, we're going to grab the Poisoner feat for it. We want Poisoner because the Boneshaper does have a poison build, like I had mentioned, and lots of access to the poison condition. For us, we're going to try to build around the Poisoner feat as well as poison damage to some extent, But of course that doesn't really mean much, as the poison damage / condition aren't that great to begin with in terms of D&D. Looking at our stats, we're going to be, quite frankly, a pretty weird multi-class. We're going to be a wizard and a warlock. Spoiler alert for the actual build. We're going to want to split our intelligence and charisma fairly evenly because of this, and that means that after point buy, we're going to want the following ability scores. 8 strength, 14 dexterity, with 7 points into it to get us there, 12 constitution, putting 4 points to get us there, 16 intelligence, putting our 7 points from point buy as well as using the +2 from custom lineage to get us 16 intelligence, and then putting 2 points into wisdom to get us 10 wisdom, and our last 7 points into charisma to gain 14 charisma. A little trick for this build is that if you actually wanted to focus more on just blasting and saves that scale with charisma, you could honestly swap charisma and intelligence. Since the build is going to be taking more wizard levels though by the time we're done with it, I figured I would focus on intelligence as the primary ability score, assuming that we're going to want to cast powerful high-level wizard spells that are going to scale off intelligence. Realistically though, with the way that wizard and warlock multi-class, you can just use warlock spells with your high-level wizard spell slots, and those would scale off charisma. And you could also just spend a bunch of spell slots creating undead, which also doesn't really need your intelligence to scale off of. So there's no real reason why we couldn't just focus Eldritch Blast as our main attack, use charisma instead. Again though, I figured that we'll probably use some powerful wizard spells eventually, so that's why I'm focusing intelligence here. For our background, anything really goes. You're going to want to pick something that fits with our theme or that has a bit of occultist / forbidden knowledge aspect to it, since that's kind of the feel that the Boneshaper gets with their ability to pay life in order to summon undead. So something like Astral Drifter from the Spelljammer setting is also pretty appropriate in all honesty for a character that's meant to be trapped between the planes like Aethers are. It would also get us a free feat as well in the Magic Adept feat, but make sure you talk to your DM before you just go ahead and take that, because not every DM is going to be okay with every background for their campaign setting. Starting into the level breakdown of our build now, we're going to start off with Wizard. We are a Wizard Warlock like I said, and we want to focus more levels into Wizard for higher level and more powerful Wizard spells, along with the powerful bonuses to animate dead and other various features that the necromancer wizard gets. If we wanted to be more mechanically powerful, pick something like sorcerer to go divine soul or shadow sorcerer, both of which would synergize a little bit better with our warlock levels that we're going to get later on, but neither one really has a specifically necromantic feel, and they don't gain the bonuses to animate dead. That's pretty much the main reason why we're going to go wizard, is to become a necromancer and gain the animate dead bonuses, just like our Boneshaper has bonuses to their base skeletons in Frosthaven. At level 2, we are Wizard 2, and now we are a Necromancer. The School of Necromancy specifically gets Necromancy Savant, making it easier and cheaper to copy necromancy spells into our spellbook. And we also gain Grim Harvest. Grim Harvest says that once per turn, when we kill one or more creatures with a spell of first level or higher, we regain hit points equal to twice the spell's level, or 3 times if that spell belongs to the School of Necromancy. The important thing to note here is that this doesn't say that we have to use a spell in our spell book, just that the spell has to be a leveled spell and be from the Necromancy School, meaning this will synergize really well with some warlock spells that we might pick up later and some other features that we might get as well. Speaking of spells, along with cantrips, I didn't mention this at level 1, but for then, as well as now on, we're going to want to pick up any spells that go along with our Boneshaper theme. For the purposes of us, mainly want to pick up spells that feature some sort of element of darkness or necrotic damage to make up for that dark element. And then we also want some spells that probably revolve around Earth, or the power of the Earth itself, to make up for the Earth element. We also probably want some poison spells in order to actually put our poisoner feat to use. At level 3, we are Wizard 3, and here we just gain 2nd level spell slots as well as some 2nd level spells. At level 4, we are Wizard 4, and here we gain our first ability score improvement / feat. We are going to take a feat, and we're going to take Shadow Touched. Shadow Touched is a very nice feat for us thematically because it emphasizes that idea that we are caught between the planes as a character, and it also is a half feat giving us a +1 boost to one of our ability scores. For us, I'm going to say it's boosting our intelligence, but you could have it boost charisma if you wanted to. We also gain a free casting of the invisibility spell, as well as a free casting of a first level spell of our choice from either the necromancy spell list or the illusion spell list. And here's where I'm going to recommend a melee spell of all things. We're going to pick up Inflict Wounds. Inflict Wounds is really nice because it works as a powerful melee spell, and it also works for our darkness type of theme since it deals necrotic damage. But beyond both of those things, it's actually an amazing spell to have with our Grim Harvest feature. Inflict Wounds is perfect for Grim Harvest, and it's awesome that we can gain access to it even though a wizard normally can't. Plus, since we're able to pick it up with Shadow Touched, we can use our intelligence for the casting of Inflict Wounds instead of wisdom like we would have to if we multi-classed into Cleric or charisma from Divine Soul Sorcerer. And this is just even better for us because it means we can still focus our intelligence as our spellcasting ability modifier while having a spell that can deal a ton of damage to enemies that we hit with it. And even though it's melee, it should be still pretty good to use, since if we kill an enemy with it, we're going to heal for 3 times the level of the spell. At level 5, we are Wizard 5, and here we finally gain 3rd level spell slots, as well as 3rd level spells. You can pick up Animate Dead, and I suppose I'd recommend it if you want to, but if you're okay to wait a little bit, to make it a little bit more optimal, we're going to get it at level 6 for free anyways, and we'll get the improved version as well. So, even though we're supposed to be a full necromancer who's summoning up a bunch of undead buddies to help us in combat, we're going to hold off on Animate Dead at least for a little bit. What we can pick up though is the Summon Undead spell from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Summon Undead lets us call forth one singular undead spirit instead of a whole bunch of undead creatures, but that's still going to be a little bit more of a powerful undead spirit rather than a bunch of little weaker buddies that are stuck as only zombies or skeletons. Now, if you want just a nice buddy to help you at range most of the time, then picking Skeletal is going to give you a skeletal wizard-like undead minion. Actually pretty powerful because it has a nice ranged attack. The other options though, Ghostly and Putrid, are pretty interesting for specific types of builds. The Ghostly one we'll worry about later because that build comes online a little bit later into our levels. But the Putrid form is going to be really effective when we pick up Animate Dead next level. And the reason for that is because the Putrid form has a festering aura. Any creature other than us that starts its turn within 5 feet of that Putrid spirit must succeed on a Constitution saving throw, or they will be poisoned until the start of their next turn. The thing about this and why it stacks really well with Animate Dead is because the skeletons or zombies that we make from Animate Dead are immune to the poison condition, meaning that they can walk up into melee with this putrid creature and not be affected by its aura. If we do end up poisoning a creature, that would allow us to use the Rotting Claw ability of the Putrid Undead, which says that if a creature that is poisoned gets hit, has to make another Constitution saving throw, and if they fail that saving throw, they are then paralyzed until the start of their next turn. It's a lot of Constitution saving throws and setup to go through, admittedly, but hopefully, given that we're still a sort of low level, it should happen every now and then. Finally, at level 6, we gain the Animate Dead spell, and we also gain a better version of it through the Undead Thrall's Necromancer feature. Undead Thralls says that we can add the Animate Dead spell to our spellbook if it's not already there, and whenever we cast Animate Dead, we can target one additional corpse or pile of bones, creating an extra zombie or skeleton. When we do create those undead, they then have extra benefits. Their hit point maximum is increased by an amount equal to our wizard level, and they add our proficiency bonus to their damage rolls. And the reason this is nice is because we can command multiple skeletons at once. Summon Undead, our actual concentration spell that we're using in combat to bring out our Putrid Undead, doesn't require an action at all either. So this means that we can use our bonus action for all of our skeletons and just have our Putrid Undead still move and take its own action in combat too. So what we could do is give out a bunch of vials of poison that we got from our Poisoner feat that up until now we've never really used or talked about, and we could give those vials to our undead skeleton minions. Then, because the bonus action command is so unrestrictive, we could have them take the action to apply that poison to their weapons, which would presumably be short swords, but you could probably outfit them with any sort of equipment that you wanted to outfit them with. Admittedly, that means that we would have to make a lot of poison vials, because we have a lot of skeletons that we can give these poison vials to. But if we have enough money and prep time, we can outfit our little army of skeletons with a whole plethora of poison to use in combat, getting us much more value out of this poisoner feat than would be initially intended if we were just applying it to our own weapon. This poison damage isn't going to ignore resistance, because that's not how the poisoner feat works, unfortunately. But the fact that it could also potentially cause the enemy that we're attacking to gain the poisoned condition makes it really good for setting up our undead's rotting claw ability. All in all, these features really synergize well together in terms of poison, but it's just unfortunate that we had to wait till level 6 to get all these features, and that poison kind of falls off pretty quickly as a viable damage type and condition once we start fighting other undead, constructs, or other creatures that are just flat out immune to poison damage and the poison condition. I will admit that I sort of consider this the low-level build of our Boneshaper, even though it's kind of more mid-tier play, but hopefully you'll be able to get it to work at least a couple of times and have some fun interacting with all of your minions as well as your summoned undead, and can dish out some major poison and paralysis to a couple of enemies. After Wizard 6, it's time to now go over to Warlock and pick up Warlock levels like I said we were going to do. It's also time to switch gears into our Fear build instead of our Poison build. With Warlock 1, we get to pick our subclass, and we're of course picking the Undead Warlock. Not the Undying, specifically the Undead. And with the Undead Warlock, we gain an expanded spell list, so we now have access to Bane and False Life. We also have Form of Dread. Form of Dread says that, as a bonus action, we can transform ourselves to 1 minute to make ourselves look a bit more intimidating and undead-like as a necromancer / Boneshaper. And when we do transform, we gain temporary hit points equal to 1d10 plus our Warlock level. We are immune to the Frightened condition, and once during each of our turns, when we hit a creature with an attack, we can force it to make a Wisdom saving throw, potentially causing that creature to be frightened until the end of our next turn. The reason I call this the start of our Fear build is because we can now dish out a lot of the Frightened condition if we use the Ghost form for when we're casting Summon Undead. The Ghost form of Summon Undead has the attack Deadly Touch, which says that it's a melee attack using our spell attack modifier to hit, and if they do hit a creature, that creature then has to make a Wisdom saving throw or be frightened of the ghost until the end of its next turn. This will hopefully spread a lot of the Frightened condition to our enemies and allow us to have a little bit of damage mitigation once they do become frightened by either us or the undead. At level 8, we are Warlock 2, and here we gain Invocations. For our Invocations, you can pick 2 of any of your favorites that you want. There's none that we specifically want just yet, but we would pick up as a Boneshaper. We also have another Warlock spell slot that comes back on a short rest, and of course you can pick any Warlock spells that fit the spell themes that we want of Darkness and Earth to go along with our Boneshaper build. At level 9 we are Warlock 3, and here we gain the Pact boon. For our Pact boon, I'm going to say we want Pact of the Tome because we're able to upgrade it eventually for some nice bonuses through our invocations, but it also allows us to feel a bit more wizardy by giving us some extra cantrips from any class spell list, and eventually allowing us to add in some extra ritual spells as well. But within reason, you could pick any pact that you wanted. At level 10, we are now Warlock 4, and we therefore gain another ability score improvement / feat. You can pretty much improve any sort of ability scores that you want, but since our intelligence is an odd number thanks to Shadow Touched, I'm going to say we want to round that off. I'm going to say that we're increasing our intelligence by 1 and our constitution by 1, and then we'll round off constitution later. But just know that if you didn't want to increase your constitution and were okay just sitting at the back and hopefully not getting hit, then picking up a half feat that does increase our intelligence is perfectly viable as well. Level 11, we are now a Warlock 5, and here we're going to gain another invocation. New invocation that we're going to pick up that we definitely want to pick up is Undying Servitude. Undying Servitude just lets us cast Animate Dead once for free without using a spell slot. Once we do so, we can't do it that way again until we finish a long rest, but 1 extra free casting of Undying Servitude per day is awesome for us. It's at this point that I'm going to point out, in terms of D&D, you could have just an army of undead following you around. But to maintain the sort of Frosthaven theme, I'm going to assume that we are casting Animate Dead for free with our Warlock spell slot now, getting a couple of skeletons together for our sort of personal guard or buddy minions to follow us around. And then we'll use the rest of our spell slots for other various powerful spells that we want, and just have access to these summons that we can continuously bring back each and every single day, assuming they die by the end of the day. Finally, at level 12, we are Warlock 6, and this is the last Warlock level we're going to be taking, unless you wanted to focus more Warlock instead of Wizard. But I think it's a pretty thematic end to our Warlock levels. We gain the Grave Touched feature from the Undead Warlock, and that says that we no longer need to eat, drink, or breathe, so we are pretty much undead ourselves to some extent, which makes sense for the Boneshaper's theme. And in addition to that, once during each of our turns, when we hit a creature with an attack and roll damage against that creature, we can replace the damage type with necrotic damage. While we have our Form of Dread up, not only can we replace the attack's damage with necrotic damage, but we can also roll one additional damage die when determining how much necrotic damage that creature takes. Having a little bit extra necrotic damage, and also the undead feel and theme from Grave Touched, makes us feel like a good Boneshaper that are gaining some powers that act like the darkness type element from Frosthaven as well. At level 13, we are back to Wizard, and honestly, we're kind of going to speed through the rest of the build here because it's all a lot of the same sort of stuff. We've gotten most of the features that we want and need that make us a Boneshaper. Either way, for levels 13, 14, and 15, we're sticking with Wizard that entire time, going up to Wizard 7, 8, and 9, and gaining more powerful spell slots, as well as more powerful spells with those levels. At level 16, we're a Wizard 10, and here we gain the next Necromancer feature, Inured to Undeath. We have resistance to necrotic damage, and our hit point maximum can no longer be reduced. So now we really start to feel like an undead. We're really very close to feeling like a fully undead being. For levels 17, 18, and 19, we continue up Wizard, like I have said, and we just gain more Wizard spell slots and better Wizard spells. The one thing I will mention that I completely glossed over back at levels 13, 14, and 15 is that we did, back then, get to level 8 Wizard, which gave us another ability score improvement / feat, and here we get to Wizard 12, which gives us yet another ability score improvement / feat. Now going back to when we got to Wizard 8, I would recommend picking up Resilient Constitution to improve our Constitution by +1 and gain proficiency in Constitution-based saving throws. That'll improve both our health as well as our concentration checks for maintaining concentration on our Summon Undead or any other concentration spell that you're maintaining. Now we can either choose to improve our intelligence up to a max of 20, capping it off, or we can choose to increase our charisma if we wanted our charisma to be a little bit better. There's no real wrong answer between those two ability scores to improve. Finally, at level 20, we are Wizard 14, and we gain the Capstone Necromancer feature, and that is Command Undead. With Command Undead, we are now able to bring other undead creatures under our control, even those that aren't created by us. As an action, we can choose one undead creature that we can see within 60 feet of us. That creature must make a charisma save, and if they fail, they then become friendly to us and obey our own commands until we use this feature again. I think that's a pretty underestimated feature in terms of getting extra power and making us feel like a full Boneshaper. We're not just commanding our own undead through our own abilities or magical power. We're actually commanding all undead because we have a direct connection to the plane of life and death. Overall, I'd say we're pretty close to the Boneshaper because it's kind of hard not to be by just going Necromancer. We have the ability to create skeletons. That's awesome. We have a buff to our skeletons, which is also awesome since the Boneshaper has builds that just buff their skeletons and don't do anything else. We're still a pretty powerful caster given that we have 2 repeatable 3rd level spells that come back on a short rest thanks to Warlock, and we also have up to 7th level spells as we're a level 14 Wizard. We don't have anything super world breaking, but we also don't really want to have anything super world breaking since that doesn't usually happen in Frosthaven. The main things from our regrets, that's the poison build, as well as some of the elements and things. First of all, don't get me wrong, we have a very interesting poison build, but it's unfortunate that poison isn't as good of an option in terms of damage and a condition in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. It's also really unfortunate that it takes so long to come online, at least for us and our own use of the poison. We can still use the Poisoner feat to make poisons and hand those out to our allies, and use Ray of Sickness to cast some on-demand poison and do some damage as well from lower levels. And that might be good for giving enemies the poison condition around then, but it doesn't really have anything to do with being a Boneshaper, so that's a little unfortunate. Our elements are pretty much taken care of through spells. Form of Dread and the abilities that we get from being an undead warlock are admittedly fairly darkness oriented, so I'll kind of take that and count it as a win. But we're not too earth focused unless you picked up a lot of earth type spells. We're pretty close to what the Frosthaven Boneshaper is capable of, and we can certainly feel like them in D&D. Have a lot of summons, we'll hopefully not bog combat down too much. We have different ways to buff our summons and let them deal out some extra damage. Let me know what you thought of the build or what you might try to change to get closer to the theme of the Boneshaper specifically, or if there's any other ways to sort of buff undead minions that I may have overlooked. Thank you so much for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.